Thank you all for coming. I see a lot of faces here. Thanks for coming to the first annual ACA safety meeting. If this goes well, and I hope it will, we plan to have one of these every year, sponsored by the Safety Committee. I see a ton of pilots here. I see young pilots, old pilots, experienced pilots, beginner pilots, and that's great. The target audience for these four presentations is you. So, without further ado, we have four presentations. I thought I had them all listed here. I don't. Erik is going to talk first about flying safely cross country. Alan Dunn is going to talk second about busy airspace traffic from a jet pilot's perspective. Oh, I did have a slide. I'll do Vanna White here. Followed by Rick Keeley is going to talk about flight preparation with a focus on checklists. And finally, the most important, Sebastian is going to talk about tow plane operations. As you all know, we have them now. So the format is going to be, they're all going to be 15 to 20 minute presentations with a little bit, with wiggle room at the end to ask questions and discussion. And if all goes correctly, we should be done in an hour and a half. Let's get started. Mr. Mann? So, Erik needs no introduction.
Yes, I did.
He's an instructor. He does flight analysis of a lot of the issues that have gone through our club.
It's on the USB drive, right? Yep, I will get it.
And when he's not painting and sanding, he's helping other people. Thanks, Erik.
All I ever do is paint and sand, so the XC accident? Correct. Okay. So this is all theory. Turn it about 10 degrees so it's square. Cool. So, hey guys, Erik Mann. I think I know 3/4 of you guys, I guess. Actually, it's nice. There's a lot of new-ish faces, which is unusual in a gliding club. So, good morning. So in 17 and a half minutes, which I've now figured out is what we actually have left per slide, per presentation, it's kind of hard to do a full-blown cross-country class. So what I thought I'd do is let's just make it real and take a look at what has happened in the last 7 to 8 years as ACA members have gone cross-country. So are you the clicker, or am I just? Or
no, just tell me when.
You're the clicker.
Yes, I am.
Click. So this is, unfortunately I had to update this. I did this a few years ago, and the title was Accidents with Significant Damage or Injury. Unfortunately I had to add death to it this year, which obviously sucks. And we'd gone, I think, 34 years without a fatality in the club until this year. And it's one of the hardest nights I've ever had in my life, was having to call Nancy on that Thursday evening to let her know that Bill had died in the crash. And obviously, we never want to have to make that call. Ron was with me. He knows what a miserable evening that was. And if you look at it, most of the significant accidents and incidents that have happened in ACA have actually happened while we've been going cross-country. Now, we're kind of unique because there aren't a lot of glider clubs that do as much cross-country as we do. So that's a wonderful thing. We fly races, we do badges, we do amazing flights, we set national records. And a lot of the people in this room are, not a lot, but several people in this room are on that list. And you know, I think of all of them as good pilots. So there's something going on when good pilots with hundreds or thousands of hours have accidents. Next slide. So I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to kind of give you guys some pictures, and I, you know, you're in the room, you know who you are. I'm on the list, but probably 25 years ago. Anyway, so Rob's accident, cross country, Ridge Day with a bunch of the guys. Realized things are going south. Tried to get to a field, got really close. did a little bit of tree surgery, and that's what happened. Again, I'm not going to go through each of them in gory detail. Next. John, is John here today? John flew down the ridge. You can see what a beautiful, look at how deep blue that sky is, the beautiful queue in the back. A pretty wild and hairy ridge day. Got down by the end of Sharp Mountain, kind of didn't exactly know where he was, or where he was, not where he was, but didn't kind of know where to go. Tried to stuff it into, I think it was a reclaimed strip mine type of field, and that's what ended up happening. Scratch an LS8. So far we're doing a nice job on
Extreme downdraft right before
Yeah.
it went in.
Well, more on that later. And there you go. Next one. So we're really not good with Roulade and Schneider gliders, by the way. We just accounted for about 10% of the U.S. fleet. Pierre went off, I guess, to do a G-Cup, or maybe thinking you were doing a G-Cup. Where's Pierre? Back there. And that's how it worked out. Not well. Okay, next one. Philip had a what's that? Inverted landing, I guess is the way to put it. On a ridge day with some snow squalls, and almost made it upwind to the golf course area. I guess golf courses, right? Not quite. Next. LS4. That's what a fiberglass patch looks like when you are repairing compression fractures in a tail boom of an LS4. Bob was up at the wave camp. Stay back one. And had a pretty challenging day, I think. Almost got back, not quite. Pretty miraculously found probably the only field in the area to more or less safely set it down, and got away with a big bumpy, a hard landing, and a little bit of damage to the tail boom concern. So that's right in front of you. I do enough public speaking, I should know not to stand in front of you. And again, all this will be available. My point isn't to get into the dissecting of everything that happened in these. Hopefully there's a theme becoming fairly obvious here. Right? Next one. That is very hard to see, but that's Wurtsboro Airport down here. That's the quarry up here. The picture is way too dark to see, and unfortunately this may hurt me a little bit later, but that's a swamp. And that's where the HPH Shark ended up after Alberto wasn't able to get the engine to fire from, I think, 400 feet AGL or something like that. Had no business being up there. Yeah, that's better. Had no business being up there and getting stuck. I think that might be it. Is there one more? Yeah. I included Claudio's in here because when I looked at this flight, I got goosebumps. This is, I think, last summer or the summer before, whatever it was. It says 3 summers ago, springs ago. Claudio was flying on a very exciting prefrontal day, and almost made it back to Blairstown. If you guys know, there's 3 very small fields that I'd never thought of as landable up the line toward Blairstown. Well, Claudio proved you could land in one straight in without having seen it. Not recommended. I think that's it. Okay. So the good news is there were a couple on there that happened on the airport. We're not going to talk about those today. But if you look at it, right, all but 3 of the ones on that first list happened during cross-country flights. Most of them were, not all of them were intentional cross-country flights, I guess, but most of them were. And all of them, in some way, shape, or form, involved having to try to get into a really marginal field, or get into a field without proper planning or selection. In most cases, the field selected the pilot didn't select the field. That's a big difference, right? So I'm not going to get into the semantics of it, but, you know, that's not a good thing. So the kind of question I think we should all be asking ourselves is, why are we going cross-country when we don't have a plan for what's going to happen when it all goes south? Now, I'm not going to talk about ridge soaring today. We just had a ridge seminar. The rules in ridge are a little bit different in the sense there are sections of the ridge where there is literally no place to land. This is oriented toward our average thermal flying, cross-country flying type of days. There's a whole separate section on ridge and making decisions about what risk you're willing to accept from cross-country. But I'm talking about your basic thermal day, heading out and going soaring. So I always like to do one thing to keep people moving. So everybody stand up, please. Everybody. Audience participation. Okay, if you have landed out at least once, landed out in a field, not at another airport. Landed out a glider in a farm field, remain standing. Everybody else, go ahead and grab a seat. Okay? So this is what you guys have to look forward to. Okay. If you've made at least 5 field landings, remain standing. Everybody else sit down. Okay? So a few of you had 1 or 2 under your belt. Yeah, okay. If you've got 10 or more, remain standing. The rest of you can sit. Okay, so now you see look around. Here's a few of us that have landed in fields a fair amount. 20 or more, remain standing. Where's Schwartz? Oh, there he is. Sorry, Ron. This is going to become a calisthenics exercise. Okay, I'll do a double jump. 50 or more. 50 or more field landings. All right, so it's me, Chip, Schwartz, and Bobby, and Bill. Okay. Wow, this is a battle, actually. All right, 70 or more. Oh! Do I have to double bump? All right. Do I have to go to 3 figures?
It's a 126.
100 or more.
I don't know anymore.
All right. What's the number, Chip?
I stopped counting at 100.
Okay, he stopped counting at 100. How many, Ron?
160.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Don't follow Ron.
How many of those resulted in significant damage to you or the glider?
0.
All right. Zero. Okay. Now, I actually reckon that about 1 in 10 field landings results in something. A gear door torn off.
Sorry, 1.
I understand. I know the one, but the point is, landing in fields is non-trivial, right? So it doesn't have to be this way. That was kind of the point, right? Ron's done 160 of them. Chip's done north of 100 of them. I've done 50 of them. Bobby's done whatever. I think I've done 54, whatever. It doesn't have to result in damage. But the thing is, you ought to be picking the field. It shouldn't be picking you, and you've got to be good at it. Now, this is not an instructional session on how to land off field. There's plenty of material on that, but I wanted to make sure that kind of reinforce a couple of points. So, click. Okay, so we're not in Kansas anymore. This is Sunflower. Is this where the sports class is going to be this year?
126.
126. So what do you guys see?
You can go anywhere.
You can pretty much close your eyes and land anywhere.
Except
Okay.
it's going to be all corn.
Actually, the round field, you want to be careful.
Right. I'm not. Again, I'm not. Okay, here, this is called poetic license. Bear with me here. I'm making a point. The point is, if you're flying out here in the Midwest, right, there's lots of field. Yeah, you still have to select. If it's high corn, you're not going to be able to land in it. If there's wires, if there's this is not about that. This is about saying, look, if you're flying out in the Midwest, you typically have lots of options, right? And also the fields tend to be between big and huge, right? I mean, the grid in a lot of areas is a mile by a mile, I think, right? A lot of the Midwestern towns, in farm areas, the grid, the road grids and things are mile by a mile, and a lot of times the fields fit in between those. So you've got a 5,000-foot long field to land in. The typical northeastern field where we fly can be 500 feet, 1,000 feet. Once in a while you get a 2,000, 3,000 footer, but those are the exception rather than the norm. So, click. Now, it's a little hard to see, but this is the ridge. Unfortunately, that's one of the mistakes I make is not lightening these pictures. But the water gap is right up here. This is the run down toward Cherry Valley. This is actually called Cherry Valley Road. And you see, there are fields in here, in this section. They don't look anything like the fields out in Kansas, right? There are fields, and sometimes there's actually a really good one, right? I think it's actually right here. I think it has a hunting stand in the middle. It might even have a power line across it. But the point is, when we're flying cross country around here, you ought to be paying a lot more attention to what the terrain looks like in front of you, right? You can't just go blindly flying off here at 3,000 feet and assume that you're going to be able to find some place to land. You got to know where you are, where you're headed, and what's out the window in front of you. The other thing that's happening a lot is, as we get more and more cool gadgets in the cockpit with moving maps and stuff, I've pulled people out of fields where they literally didn't know they were going to hit the ground until they finally looked up out the window and stopped staring at the computer. I picked up a guy, really nice guy, John Carter. John? John, right?
Yeah.
John crashed into one of the most miraculous survivals I've ever seen. He literally flew into a reclaimed orchard. So they'd cut the trees down, and they stick chains on the stumps, and they pull them halfway out, and then they let them sit. And he somehow splattered into the side of one of those, and really didn't hurt himself. Did a lot of damage to the glider. But his comment when I got him was, I don't know how this happened. I was looking at the computer, and I was fiddling around, and when I looked up, I had to put the gear down and land. Okay? So the only message of this is, if you're going to be going cross country, you need to be aware of landing options. That's your number one goal, is if you're going to land out, let's do it safely. Everything else is secondary. So, next slide. So the rules of thumb, right? And again, these are not cast in stone. I think they're a little bit different for a 126 and a little bit different if you're early versus late. This is one set of rules of thumb. Again, this is not a training class about how to land out, but guys, we know better than this, right? When you start getting down around 3,000 feet around here, for the most part, you need to be knowing where you're going to go next, right? If you're low near the water gap, okay, you kind of still have some options. You can head over towards Stroudsburg, you can head over the backside toward Bangor, you can probably make it in the general direction of Cherry Valley, but you don't have a lot of time to fiddle around, right? You need to have a plan. So you need to know that you've got an area of decent fields around you. When you get down around 1,500 feet, you need to know, if there's 3 fields down there, which is the one that I'm going to be landing in, right? And by the time you get down to, and again, these are squishy. This is not a beginner class, right? If we do the actual beginner class, we'll talk a lot more about it. But as a rule of thumb, you're committed to land at some altitude between 800 and 1,000 feet, right? Most of our wrecks happened either here, somewhere between here and here, right? We got caught not really having a plan for what was going to happen if the next thermal didn't work out or this thermal didn't work out. And we ended up having to find something at the last minute and squeeze it in. So this year, have a plan when you're going cross country. Know what's out the window in front of you. That's all the exciting stuff. And don't leave an area of good fields until you've got enough altitude to get to the next one. It's simple stuff, right? Gliding over the forest up by Beltsville, or parts of the area between the ridge between Kutztown and down toward Pottstown, right? There's 5-mile, 8-mile, 10-mile stretches where there's really no place to land. So if you're at 3,000 feet, you're really not in great shape to go poking across that and hoping you find something on the other side, right? Stay where you've got, get a little bit of altitude, and then go. Okay, next one. How am I doing? I got like 3 minutes left? 4?
Hold on, I'll tell you in a sec.
Well, anyway. So part of this is field selection. The other part of it is you need to be damn good at landing. And this is something I wanted to also point out. There's a couple people in the room that I want to just point out and ask you to say a word or two. But you'll notice at the airport, a lot of times, even on a not very busy day, one of us glass drivers will come in and the glider ends up 50 yards, 100 yards on the other side of the taxiway, right? And unless something, got in the way, there was traffic conflict or whatever, that's obviously not where we wanted to land and stop. So that tells me that a lot of us aren't as good at performing a precision spot landing as either we think we are or we need to be. Now, it's very different, right? At 126, you can probably get down and stop easily before where the old skeletal hangar was, the kind of the middle of the line, right? There's some people that do an amazing job. Bobby, I watch in the LS3. I mean, Bobby routinely gets down and stopped by the beginning of the trailer line when he's landing on 2.5. Schwartz can.
Watching very. I'm not doing that good.
Okay.
I stopped on the taxes quite a bit with that car. There's no break.
Okay. Well, you're getting worse in your old age. Schwartz, I've watched come in and be stopped well before his tie down, which is kind of at the middle to the beginning of the line. And where's Chip? Chip flies what's not known to be one of the best, easiest landing gliders. I mean, a decent glider. Let me get a standard class glider, but it's not known to be one of the best gliders.
I had
And
to sell it for one day. Don't talk it down now.
So I actually wanted to ask Schwartz, if you wouldn't mind, just stand up for a second. What's your philosophy about practicing landings? Because I've heard you talk about this before.
My philosophy is every landing's in practice off field for me. Just the way I do it. And I have utilized that practice, and it's come off well for me. So I guess I got a selling point there. It's the things you got to do is be on speed, know where you're going to touch down, stop when you get down to it. I come, let's say Blairstown. Everybody knows Blairstown. Landing 07. I line up over the trees, and I pretend that's my obstacle as I'm coming down. I go 50 miles an hour usually, unless it's a real crazy day. And once I'm clear of the trees, dump it down onto the runway and scoot on down to my spot down at the other end of the field. I'm going ground effect all the way down there. That's a lot of fun. So I get to do a little bit of flat hatting. And but that's it.
Yeah.
Every flight, everything.
Chip, I said I was going to put you on the spot. You also do something I've watched on every landing, as far as how you approach landing at Blairstown, for example.
At Blairstown and most places I fly, the exception would be at a contest when I've been in the air for 5 or 6 hours and I'm really tired. I just want to get it down nice and smooth and not hit anybody. But if it's a practice flight here, it's maximum performance for me, which means often full side slip, full dive brakes, and I'm trying to get down to where I park my trailer, which is at the near end of the trailer line.
Paul, you can click once. I'll show you. So.
I have a good wheel brake, so that helps a lot. But yeah, my philosophy is that someday I may have to get in that way, and I want to be able to put it down exactly where I want. I've only had to do it a few times, and that many times I've landed off the airport. But the one time you have to get in there, it's nice to know you can.
Yep. So that's really the takeaway, right? You got to know. You got to have a field available to get into. And secondly, you got to know how to get into it, how to get stopped, and how to get landed. Now, the how part, right? That's the training part. That's not today. Okay, this is the safety refresher, which is don't lose sight of that. Because I think what happens is we all get a little bit complacent, right? We've all been flying. We have these great flights. We do the 1000K. We come back, and along the way, we probably had 10 times during the flight where we could have ended up in a field. Every one of those needs to be a max performance. Perfect job. Otherwise, it could end up really badly. So, yeah, Chip.
I know we're running low on time here, but what I'm doing, apparently, I know most people not do it, but a lot of people say don't do it. I'm trying every time to save my altitude until the very last minute. And I've seen a lot written saying, if you do that, if you have to slip and use full brake, you're keeping too much. You should be coming in with half dive brakes or whatever. I don't agree. It's probably a good topic for discussion later, but I'm intentionally saving my altitude to the very last minute, as if it were a field or there were traffic moving around or whatever.
Yep.
And most people say don't do that.
So one thing, just to give everybody a reference point, this is, I know the picture's a little bit blurry, but this is 2.5. This is where we typically stage the gliders. That's maybe 10 feet past the fence line. And this is the hill, the beginning of the hill, right in front of the JRS shack, right? That's 1,000 feet, okay? So if you can't routinely come over that fence, and to Chip's point, not with your tail wheel dragging through the top link of the fence, but with, let's say, 10 20 feet of clearance above that fence and get down and stopped, you know, somewhere in here, let's say 750 feet, you're probably not ready to go do cross country in whatever ship you're flying. So I would look at it that way. I think that's it. One more click, yeah. And that prepares you. This is actually just by Hoagland Road, but this is a pretty typical field that you might have to get into. That's 1,100 feet long, maybe 1,200 feet long. Don't worry about it. Yeah, there's slope to it. There's trees. That's not about that. But that's the kind of field that's very typical in the area that we fly. Relatively narrow, not super long. Some trees on one end, and that's 1,100 feet. So that's 100 feet longer than the Blairstown section that you should be practicing in. If you can't be comfortable that you can get into a field like that, a lot of the area that we fly in is probably not suitable for you for cross country. That's it.
Awesome. Eric, thank you so much for your intelligent words. And the takeaway I get from listening to Chip and Ron is prepare yourself by practicing landings. Try to squeeze them. I don't want to paraphrase what they said, but pretend, get your emergency landings down before you go cross country. It'll really help. If you're doing these 3 takeoffs and landing stuff, learn every landing.